On this day of discovery, from the land of the Bible, part 1 of a road tour of the Galilee. Galilee, the northern region of Israel where Jesus lived. Galilee, the lush mountains, valleys, and water sources where conquerors, kings, and prophets left their marks. Galilee still speaks to us today as part of the land and story of the Bible. Gateway to the Galilee, next on Day of Discovery. At the crossroads of the ancient world lies a small bridge of land connecting the continents of Africa, Asia, and Europe. According to the Bible, it remains the most significant location on earth. Known for centuries as the Holy Land, these are the hills and valleys of Israel, the land of the Bible. Mark D. Hahn and Jimmy DeYoung have returned to this biblical landscape, as they often have, to explore one geographically distinct and historically important region known as the Galilee, the setting for many of the Bible's most significant events and unfolding stories. Because Jerusalem is the anchor point of the Holy Land, they begin this day's journey on the Mount of Olives, which rises to the east of the city's historic center.
In the Bible, when you read about the different sections in New Testament times, you read about Judea, Samaria, and the Galilee. Everything from Jerusalem south to the Red Sea would be the area of Judea. And then from Jerusalem north to Nazareth, you have Samaria. And from Nazareth north to the Lebanese border, you have the Galilee, the Lower Galilee, the Upper Galilee, with the Sea of Galilee over here and to the west, the Mediterranean, the Dead Sea here just outside of Jerusalem.
And we're headed today north. We're going to go out Route 1, hit Route 6, and then up to the Galilee. And as we do, we're actually going to be looking back in time to some of the people, the places, the events that make up it's the greatest story ever told.
We're going to have an opportunity to see much of this area, many places that will be familiar to you as you hear about them, places you read about in the Bible. For example, we'll stop at Megiddo. That was one of Solomon's chariot cities. It was on the trade route, the military route, leading out of Africa all the way over to Saudi Arabia, to Mecca. Then we'll make our way up to Mukraka. Maybe you've never heard of that, but Mount Carmel, that's the location where the prophet Elijah challenged the prophets of Baal. And then, of course, concluding our journey today over in Nazareth, hometown of Jesus Christ for some 28 years.
Really, Jim, all the places, the people you're talking about are like chapters of the story of the Bible, the history of the Bible, which, like our own journey together, is going to have a beginning, a journey, and a destination. What do you say, Jim? Should we go?
I'm going to let you fold the map. I'm no good at that at all.
Today's modern highways in Israel tend to obscure the fact that they often follow roads that have existed for thousands of years. Those ancient paths crisscross this small strip of land on the eastern shore of the Mediterranean Sea that has, throughout most of human history, been merely the land between. The land between Africa, Asia, and Europe. The land between civilization's ancient superpowers, Egypt, Greece, Persia, and Rome. This region, known in pre-Roman ages as Canaan, was an area to be traveled through on the way to someplace else, until the God of a man named Abraham chose this land to tell the greatest story ever told. Only with the coming of the family of Abraham did the people of surrounding nations begin talking about astounding events that were happening here at the crossroads of the ancient world. Over the centuries that followed, this land bridge to other places became known by the remarkable events that occurred here. Here, according to the Bible, the Lord of an unlikely people showed himself to be the God of gods and the King of kings. Through a promised land, a chosen people, and a prophesied Messiah, the predicted blessing would come to all the nations of the world. And now, because of that still unfolding story, Jimmy and I headed north on the coastal plain, following one of antiquity's major interstate highways. This road came to be called the Via Maris, or the Way of the Sea. This was the most traveled Middle Eastern trade route in and out of Egypt. The first stop on our journey to the Galilee would be at a strategic intersection along the Via Maris, the fortress city of Megiddo. But in order to reach Megiddo, we had to first go through the gateway to the Galilee, a pass in the Mount Carmel range.
The Mount Carmel range rises fairly abruptly off of the plain and out of the Mediterranean Sea, about 1,700 feet. And it forces traffic off the coast and somehow through the range into the Jezreel Valley. There are actually three passes, a northern one, a southern one, fairly broad, but a bit out of the way if you want to go directly to Megiddo, which is where the route wants to go. The central pass, the Megiddo Pass, of the three, it's the most difficult, the narrowest at one point. The pass then opens up quite dramatically, Megiddo right at the point of it, the end of it. And it sits quite nicely on the edge of the valley.
We're here on the edge of the fertile fields of the Jezreel Valley, just outside of Tel Megiddo, ancient gates that would have led into the city. A tell because over 20 different civilizations have been built one upon the other. And this ancient city dates back even to the time of the conquest of the land, 3,500 years ago, when Joshua would have brought the children of Israel in to conquer the promised land. This was one of the over 30 city-states that Joshua would have captured. Later, Solomon fortified the city. He made it one of his chariot cities, one of three that would be on the trade route leading from Africa on into Asia and into the Far East. And then this particular location has been talked about over the centuries as the spot where the armies of the world will gather. This Tel Megiddo overlooks the Jezreel Valley, where that final battle will take place in the future at the time of the return of the Messiah.
You know, you could come to a site like this and say, what have you got? You've got an ancient gate, you've got stone, you've got rubble. When you open the pages of the Bible, you find that we also have here a stage for an unfolding drama. And it's far greater. This story is far greater than that of kings and of power, of struggle and control. All of this is simply staging for a much greater story of a king, a great God who was using the men and women of this place to show the whole world that there is a power, there's a source of life far greater than anything that a human king could hold.
And so, according to the first book of the Bible, it all began when God led one of history's most important people out of Babylonia to this region, the man Abraham and his wife Sarah. Here the God of Genesis announced his plan to bring blessing to the whole world through the descendants of this childless couple who had long since passed the normal age of parenting. As Jimmy and I drove away from Tel Megiddo, we wound up the Carmel Ridge from the floor of the Jezreel Valley. Because the geography has not changed much over the centuries, it was easy to imagine garrisons of soldiers camped here, and lone sentries posted among the rugged limestone rocks and woodlands overlooking these roads and trails. Here too are rich green meadows and woodlands, benefiting from the moisture-laden air that sweeps uphill from the Mediterranean Sea and condenses on the western slope. Arriving at the summit of Mount Carmel, we entered the courtyard of a church built to commemorate a battle not for land, but a spiritual battle for the hearts and minds of the people of Israel.
Here on one of the highest mountain peaks on Mount Carmel, top of a rooftop of a church looking out across the Jezreel Valley towards Mount Gilboa. There's Mount Moreh, Mount Tabor, and just in the foreground before Mount Tabor, city of Nazareth, hometown of Jesus Christ. This is at the head of the Jezreel Valley, looking between these mountain ranges. You can see from here to the north the Galilee. In fact, in the distance, even the top of Mount Hermon, the top of the upper Galilee, and down to the south towards Jerusalem, mountains of Samaria. As you make your way here to the other side of the rooftop, I believe it's probably the first time that I have ever seen from this vantage point the Mediterranean, so beautiful on this clear day. What a great, great place to be able to see, in fact, even the width of the state of Israel, from the Jordan Valley, the border to the east, all the way to the western border, located there at the Mediterranean Sea. A great vantage point to see this part of Israel, the beginnings of the Galilee.
From this vantage point, it's easy to see how the pass to Megiddo forms the Philistine gateway to the region of Galilee from the south. To the northwest is modern Akko, site of ancient Acre. It stood at the northern or Phoenician gateway to Galilee. Several miles to the east is the region's Jordan River gateway, providing access for monarchs, armies, and caravans coming up the King's Highway from Arabia through Edom, Moab, and Gilead, now modern Jordan. It's likely that this road is the one that the prophet Elijah traveled when he left his home in the hills of Gilead to deliver a message of judgment to Israel's king Ahab and his Phoenician queen Jezebel, a message that there would be no rain for 3.5 years. Expressing then the overriding story of the Bible, Elijah challenged their prophets and their god of thunder, called Baal, to a contest with the one true God.
The name of this location is Mukraka, an Arabic name that actually translated means the Mount of Burning, traditional site where Elijah confronted the prophets of Baal. Jezreel is located out in the valley there. Ahab and Jezebel lived there, and she had housed and taken care of the prophets of Baal. And after 3.5 years of no rain, Ahab confronted the prophet Elijah, said, "Are you the one causing all the problems here in Israel?" Well, that led into a confrontation between the prophets of Baal and Elijah. Elijah allowing the prophets of Baal to set up their place of burning, to prepare their animal for the sacrifice, and to call upon their gods to bring down fire. After almost trying this all day long, they weren't able to have their gods respond to their request. Elijah then had everything removed, built his place of burning, had them soak it with 12 barrels of water, and then he called down fire from the heavens, devouring everything. The animal sacrifice, the stones, the water, everything. It's right after that that Elijah told them to take the prophets of Baal down to the Kishon Brook. And there, Elijah went down and killed all of these prophets of Baal.
If one stands at the site of Mukraka, this site that Elijah, according to tradition, at least in terms of its location, challenged the priests of Baal and Asherah, it's a quite dramatic drop to the north. From Mukraka, the hills just drop sharply down to what's called the Kishon Pass. in the Kishon Pass, in fact, according to the book of Kings. This is where Elijah killed the priests of Baal and Asherah. And it's not surprising if you understand that event in its historical context and geographical context, because Phoenicia of that time came from what is today Lebanon all the way down to Mount Carmel. And so the Kishon Pass was the passage, the link between Phoenicia and Israel. It's through the Kishon Pass that this Baal worship entered into Israel. So in this symbolic gesture, Elijah slays the priests of Baal and Asherah in this valley.
The distance from the top of Mount Carmel to the Kishon Brook below is relatively short, but the route is steep. And in this beautiful light, in such a quiet setting, it's hard to imagine what happened near this spot. Elijah directing the execution of 400 prophets of Baal. And I try to imagine what was racing through the minds of the Israelites, having just witnessed fire coming down from heaven, burning up an entire water-soaked altar, rocks and all. And now they're standing here watching this execution. I wonder if they finally remembered why they were the chosen people, why they were brought to this promised land. I wonder if they remember that they were here to shine the light of the one true God, rather than to be conquered by the darkness of surrounding pagan culture. From the banks of the Kishon to the north side of the Jezreel Valley is a short and straight drive. From the valley floor to Nazareth, however, the road becomes a steep and winding way, no doubt retracing a trail long ago terraced by the hooves of untold numbers of sheep and goats with their attending shepherds. Moist air flowing across the plain of Akko from the sea also condenses on these slopes, covering the springtime hills with wildflowers and new grass.
Now, from the base of that valley, the hills rise up again. Not as high as Mount Carmel. These are lower-lying hills, but these low-lying hills form, in fact, what we call Lower Galilee, which are the same hills on which Nazareth sits.
Okay, get out. Good. It's busy. Sunday afternoon here in Nazareth. These are Christian families having a picnic on a beautiful day. Not a cloud in the sky, Jim. In fact, look, there's the moon up there. In the middle of the day, you can see the moon. Look at those little kids.
We're going to have a wonderful view from here at the precipice. Up the
This is
pathway here.
the Mount of the Precipice. It's just outside of Nazareth, right, Jim?
Yes, it is.
This Nazareth Ridge runs due east and west. If you're interested in going from Egypt to Mesopotamia, then you want to go around this ridge. It's too high to go up and over. You can either go around it on the western side, most went around it on the eastern side, and then continue your journey. This ridge is fairly isolated, you might say, by itself. It sticks up by itself. Valleys north and south, low points east and west. It rises steeply enough out of the Jezreel Valley that you wanted to stay off of it, unless you live there, unless you were a local.
At the time of Jesus Christ 2,000 years ago, a little village of maybe 10 or 30 families, around 300, that would have lived in that city where the angel Gabriel appeared to Mary, told her she would have the Messiah, the Son of God, Jesus Christ. It was that same city that after the birth of the Messiah in Bethlehem and then a trip into Egypt for almost a year, Mary and Joseph would have brought their young son back to Nazareth. Beautiful view from here, top the overlook, overlooking Nazareth, and in the valley below, the Jezreel Valley that extends all the way from the coast of Israel, the Mediterranean coast, across to the Jordan Valley. It's the lower border of the Galilee area.
Jesus, of course, grows up in Nazareth from the time he was maybe just old enough to walk until the time that he was, until the time was fulfilled, and his ministry would begin. Maybe altogether, 25 years, 28 years, something like that. And during those initial growing up years, they pass quickly in the gospel. We can only imagine what Jesus did. All sorts of things. in addition to just having a good time, walking among the hills and fields and valleys and so on. And he perches himself on the edge of the Jezreel Valley, at the edge of this Nazareth Ridge. It's quite a high precipice, a lookout, you might say. You can see forever from the top when the air is clear. Deep into Samaria, deep into Galilee, into Transjordan. Were it not for Mount Carmel, you could see the Mediterranean Sea. And as he looks into the Jezreel Valley, growing up as a kid, just out on a hike, going to Shabbat school, a religious education, knowing the stories of the past, his past, the Old Testament, recalling to mind over there on Mount Carmel where Elijah met, fought with, combated the prophets of Baal. Down at his feet he can see Mount Moreh and where the village of Shunem was, where Elisha went about doing good and raised a boy to life. The ministries of Elijah and Elisha very much just at his feet, you might say. Where Gideon fought a great battle against the Midianites, where Deborah and Barak fought battles against Sisera and Jabin, king of Hatzor, these great redemptive acts of God at his feet. And you wonder how, as he reflected on the stories as they were told in the Bible and on other stories told about them in the oral tradition, then going up and looking at the land and putting the pieces in place, how this helped to shape his understanding of who he was as he grew in wisdom and stature in the favor of God and man. How this energized his idea of Redeemer and Savior.
I can just imagine, as a teenager into his 20s, Jesus Christ, maybe standing here at this same spot, looking down in the Jezreel Valley, anticipating the future, what would happen when those armies of the world do gather for that final battle, the Battle of Armageddon.
Something else happened here in Nazareth that really reflects the theme of the whole great story of the Bible. Gospel writer Luke tells us that Jesus, as a young man, went into the synagogue here in Nazareth, opened up the scriptures, and the people had commented that he speaks with such grace and such wisdom. And yet he read the scriptures in such a way that he made the hometown people furious with him. And then the Gospel of Luke tells us that they actually became so angry that they brought him to a precipice of the city. Traditionally, this is called the Mount of Precipice. We don't know for sure that this was the place, but it would have been a place like this, where in their anger, the people rejected Jesus. They rejected any thought that he could possibly be the anointed Messiah of God. Tried to throw him over the cliff. But the text says that he avoided them and he made his way through them and avoided their anger. But that event, right here, somewhere in these hills of Nazareth, reflects a recurring theme of the Bible. And that's the theme of rejection. The great creator, the great king who made this world is seen as coming into this world. First, he comes into the lives of men and women and speaks to them through prophets. And over again, the stories that we've been talking about today as we visited these sites, these stories reflect men and women rejecting their king, their creator, their Lord. And right here in Nazareth, the gospel writer Luke says it was Jesus. And the New Testament says that this wasn't just a man. This was the creator himself, the king, stepping into his own world, and he was rejected. Happens over and over in the greatest story of human history.
And because God became man here, each generation has the same choice. As the Apostle John wrote, he was in the world, and though the world was made through him, the world did not recognize him. He came to that which was his own, but his own did not receive him. Yet to all who received him, to those who believed in his name, he gave the right to become children of God. children born not of natural descent, nor of human decision or a husband's will, but born of God.